I don't have any cash on me today, but could I just take a jar for the memory it brought back? The words tumbled out of Asher's mouth before he could think better of it. He was stopped at the traffic light at the edge of Willow Creek, Georgia, when a young woman approached his car with a basket of peach preserves. The sweet aroma wafting from the basket hit him like a punch of nostalgia to the gut. Suddenly, he was 8 years old again in Grandma Beatrice's kitchen, watching her stir the preserves in the copper kettle while humming a tune he could no longer recall. The young woman looked at him with curiosity. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her hands firmly holding the basket, and her smile seemed genuine, something Asher hadn't seen in a long time in New York, where every smile came with an agenda or a contract attached. "You sure can." Her answer surprised him. "When a memory's that good, you pay with your heart." Asher was speechless. In his world, everything had a price tag. Everything was negotiated. Everything came with interest and installments. Finding someone who offered something for free, and so naturally, seemed impossible. He accepted the jar she held out, still incredulous. "Seriously?" "Of course." She chuckled, a clear sound that contrasted with the distant hum of cars. "My grandma always says peach preserves were made to spark good memories. If they manage to do that, they've done their job." The light turned green, and the cars behind him began to honk impatiently. Asher waved a thank you and drove on, but he couldn't take his eyes off the rearview mirror where the young woman's image shrunk until it disappeared. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not from nervousness, but from something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine emotion. He drove through the familiar streets of the town until he found a simple inn in the center. The room was small, with light wood furniture and a window overlooking the town square. Nothing compared to the luxury of his penthouse in New York, but there was something comforting in that simplicity. He sat on the bed and opened the jar of peach preserves. The first spoonful was a trip back in time. The taste was exactly as he remembered. Just the right amount of sweetness with small pieces of fruit that melted in his mouth. He closed his eyes and could almost hear Grandma Beatrice's voice. "Asher, honey, come taste this. It's delicious." How many years had passed without feeling longing? In New York, there was no time for nostalgia. It was always the next deal, the next meeting, the next investment. But here, in that simple room, with the taste of peach preserve still in his mouth, the longing arrived like a wave, bringing with it a strange sense of peace. He thought about the conversation with his mother 3 days prior. Eleanor had been visibly annoyed when he announced he needed some time off, that he was going to Willow Creek, Georgia. That little backwater town, she'd called it, as if the place where Beatrice had lived was too insignificant to merit attention. But maybe that was exactly what Asher needed. A place small enough for him to find himself, quiet enough to hear his own thoughts. In New York, the noise was constant. Cars, phones, people talking about money and deals. Here, through the open window, he heard only the wind in the trees and the distant sound of children playing in the square. He finished the preserves and placed the empty jar on the bedside table. Tomorrow he would go back to the traffic light, not to return the jar, though he intended to do that too, but to get to know the young woman better, the one who had given him something for free, simply because he had mentioned a good memory. In 28 years of life, Asher had learned that people always expected something in return. Favors came with interest, kindnesses hid ulterior motives, and even the sweetest smiles had fixed prices. But she had broken that rule with disarming simplicity. He lay on the narrow bed and stared at the white ceiling. For the first time in months, he was able to sleep without thinking about spreadsheets, contracts, or Eleanor's expectations. He dreamed of copper kettles and the smell of peach preserves filling a small, cozy kitchen. Asher woke up before 7 in the morning, something that hadn't happened in years. In New York, he always needed 3 alarm clocks and 2 cups of coffee to function. But here, the sound of birds and the smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery naturally woke him. He showered, put on a simple t-shirt and shorts, clothes he'd brought almost by accident and which now seemed the only ones suitable for this place. Before leaving, he picked up the empty peach preserve jar and some $50 bills from his wallet. He didn't know how much a jar like that cost, but he wanted to make sure he paid enough. The traffic light was only 2 blocks from the inn. Asher arrived there at 8:30 and was disappointed not to see the young woman. He waited another 15 minutes, pacing back and forth, feeling slightly ridiculous. What was he doing? waiting for a stranger on a street corner like some lovesick teenager. He was about to give up when he saw her coming down the side street, carrying the same basket as the day before. She wore a simple light blue dress and white sneakers that had seen better days. When she recognized him, her face lit up with a genuine smile. "Well, look who's back," she said, stopping in front of him. "So you like the peach preserves?" "I love them." Asher held out the empty jar along with a $50 bill. "I came to return this and pay for what I ate yesterday." She looked at the money and frowned. $50? "Sir, a jar is $5. She laughed, shaking her head. "You're not from around here, are you?" Asher felt his face flush. Of course he wasn't from around here. He was so used to the absurd prices in New York that he had completely lost all sense of what things really cost. No, I'm not. I'm from New York." He put the large bill away and fumbled for change in his wallet. "Sorry, I have no idea how much things cost here." "I can imagine." She accepted a $10 bill and gave him change. New York must be very different from here. Very different. He hesitated, wanting to continue the conversation but not knowing how. "What's your name?" "Hazel. And you?" "Asher." "Asher." She repeated the name as if testing the sound. "Nice name. A bit formal, but nice." He laughed, surprised by her direct observation. In New York, people were always more cautious, more diplomatic. Hazel seemed to say exactly what she thought without filters or ulterior motives. "And do you make these peach preserves?" "My grandma Maeve and I. It's a family recipe passed down from mother to daughter for generations." She shifted the jars in the basket, arranging them better. "We sell them here at the traffic light, at the Saturday farmers market, and to a few local shops. Must be a lot of work." "It is, but it's enjoyable." Her eyes sparkled when she spoke. "Is there anything better than seeing people's faces when they taste something made with care?" Asher didn't know how to respond. In his experience, people did things for money, power, or recognition. The idea of doing something simply for the pleasure of seeing others happy was strange to him. "Are you staying in town long?" Hazel asked. "I don't know yet. A few weeks, maybe. I'm sort of looking for a break from life back there." She studied him with curious eyes as if trying to understand what had brought him here. Asher felt exposed under that gaze, as if she could see through all the masks he had worn for so many years. "Sometimes you really do need to slow down," she said softly. "My grandma always says life isn't a race. It's a walk." The light changed and some cars approached. Hazel positioned herself to attend to the drivers, but before she did, she turned to Asher. "If you want to see where we make the peach preserves, you can stop by our house. Rosewood Drive, 247. My grandma loves visitors." And before he could reply, she was already heading to the first car, offering her sweets with the same warm smile that had captivated Asher the day before. He stood there for a few more minutes watching Hazel work. There was something hypnotic in the way she interacted with each person, always kind, always interested, transforming a simple commercial transaction into a genuine human moment. When he finally walked away, Asher had already decided. He would visit the house on Rosewood Drive, not just for the peach preserves, but for the chance to better understand the woman who, in just 2 encounters, had begun to awaken something in him that he thought had been dead for a long time. Asher took 2 days to muster the courage to go to Rosewood Drive. As he walked the cobblestone streets, his heart pounded like a teenager on a first date. House 247 was small and painted light yellow, with a simple porch where well-tended potted plants shared space with 2 plastic chairs. The sweet aroma coming from inside confirmed he was in the right place. "Asher, so glad you came." Hazel appeared at the door wearing an apron stained with sugar. Come in, come in. Grandma's dying to meet you." The interior of the house was cozy in a way Asher's New York penthouse never could be. The white walls were decorated with old photographs and hand-embroidered wall hangings. The clean concrete floor gleamed, and the smell of sugar and cinnamon permeated every corner. "Grandma, look who's come to visit." A white-haired lady appeared, drying her hands on a dish towel. Grandma Maeve must have been about 70, but her brown eyes were lively and sharp. She examined Asher with curiosity, without judgment. "So you're the young man Hazel won't stop talking about." She extended her hand firmly. "Nice to meet you, I'm Maeve. But you can call me Grandma Maeve." "The pleasure's all mine, Grandma Maeve. I'm Asher." "Asher." A prince's name. She smiled. Want some coffee? I just brewed some. He was already being led into the kitchen. The room was the heart of the home. A gas stove, a wooden table in the center, shelves full of jars of preserves, and in the corner, 2 large copper kettles that gleamed like gold. Wow, those kettles are beautiful. Asher couldn't hide his admiration. They're my mother's legacy, Grandma Maeve explained, pouring coffee into white porcelain cups. Over 50 years of making sweets in them. They say the older the kettle, the tastier the preserve. Hazel joined them at the table, taking off her apron. Asher noticed her nails were impeccably clean, despite spending the day working with sugar and fruit. Hazel told me you're from New York, Grandma Maeve said. What brought you to our little town? Asher hesitated. How to explain his existential crisis to 2 women who seemed so grounded? I needed some time away from there. Things were kind of complicated. He took a sip of coffee. My grandma lived here when I was a kid. I thought it would be a good place to think. Thinking is always good, Grandma Maeve agreed. But it's not enough just to think. You have to feel too. And sometimes you have to do. Grandma's a philosopher. Hazel laughed affectionately. I'm not a philosopher, honey. It's just that life teaches you a lot when you pay attention. Grandma Maeve got up and went to the stove where a pot was bubbling. Asher, want to see how real peach preserves are made? He approached, fascinated. Grandma Maeve stirred the mixture with a wooden spoon, making precise circular movements. The peaches were at the perfect stage, and the sugar had created a shiny, fragrant consistency. The secret isn't in the recipe, she explained. The secret is in patience and care. You can't rush peach preserves, they have their own time. How many hours does it take? Depends on the day, the humidity in the air, the mood of the peaches. She smiled. Sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 5. You just feel when it's ready. In New York, everything had a deadline, a schedule, a cutoff. The idea of something that followed its own rhythm was both comforting and unsettling. Want to try? Hazel offered the wooden spoon. Me? But I don't know. Everyone knows how to stir. Just follow the rhythm. Asher took the spoon, feeling the weight of the wood and the resistance of the mixture. For a few minutes, nothing else existed beyond that hypnotic movement and the sweet aroma rising from the pot. Very good, Grandma Maeve approved. You've got a knack for it. When he returned the spoon, Asher realized he had completely forgotten everything. His problems, the pressure, the feeling of being lost. For a few minutes, there had only been that simple, perfect moment. Thank you. His voice was emotional. It's been a long time since I felt so present. Hazel and Grandma Maeve exchanged a knowing look, as if they knew exactly what he was feeling. Visits to the house on Rosewood Drive became routine. Asher showed up almost every day, sometimes to help with the preserve production, other times just to talk. Grandma Maeve had adopted him as if he were a grandson, and Hazel was a sweet mystery he couldn't quite decipher. One Thursday afternoon, while helping to pack jars for the Saturday farmers market, Asher noticed some books stacked in the corner of the kitchen table, all about nutrition and gastronomy. Are these yours? He asked, flipping through one of the copies. Hazel stopped labeling the jars and looked at the books with an expression that mixed nostalgia and sadness. They were, she replied softly, from my college days. You went to college for nutrition? I started. She went back to labeling, but with less enthusiasm. I did 3 years at North Carolina State University, NCSU, in Asheville. Only had 1 year left to graduate. Asher felt something clench in his chest. What happened? Life happened, Grandma Maeve answered from the stove, where she was stirring a new batch of peach preserves. My husband died and his pension wasn't enough to pay for her tuition and the household bills. Grandma, Hazel murmured, clearly embarrassed. It's okay to tell the truth, honey. Grandma Maeve turned to Asher. Hazel was always a good student. She got straight A's, her professors loved her. But when Walter died, we had to choose between eating and studying. Asher was silent, processing the information. In his world, education was a given, a natural right. It had never occurred to him that someone might have to choose between studying and surviving. I don't regret it, Hazel said, but there was a pang of melancholy in her voice. Grandma needed me, and we built this together. She gestured, encompassing the kitchen. That has value too. Of course it does, Asher quickly agreed. But it must be hard to leave a dream unfinished. A dream doesn't die, it just changes form, Grandma Maeve philosophized. She wanted to help people eat better. Now she does it differently with the preserves that feed the heart. Hazel smiled at her grandma, but Asher noticed the smile didn't reach her eyes. There was a wound there, well healed, but still sensitive. You could go back to studying, he said impulsively. I could help with the costs or… No. Hazel's answer was firm, almost sharp. Thank you, but no. Awkwardness filled the kitchen. Asher realized he had stepped into dangerous territory, but he didn't quite understand why. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I know you wanted to help. Hazel softened her tone. But every achievement has to be mine. In my own way. In my own time. Or our way, Grandma Maeve corrected. You're not alone in this life, honey. Asher observed the exchange between them, feeling simultaneously touched by their complicity and embarrassed by his own naivete. Of course she wouldn't accept money from him. They barely knew each other and he was offering to pay for college as if offering coffee. I really am sorry, he repeated. I'm still learning how things work here. How things work where? Hazel asked, curious. In places where money solves everything too easily. Asher sat in the chair, suddenly tired. In New York, when I have a problem, I can usually pay someone to fix it. I forgot that not everyone lives like that. And you live like that. Hazel's question held no judgment, just genuine curiosity. Asher thought about the question. Did he live like that? Or did he just exist within a system that worked like that? I guess so, at least until I came here. He looked at the two women who were watching him attentively. My family has money, a lot of money, and I spent my whole life thinking that solved everything. And does it? Grandma Maeve asked. It solves some things. Asher was honest. But it doesn't solve others. It doesn't solve loneliness. It doesn't solve the feeling that you're living the wrong life. It doesn't solve the emptiness. Hazel studied him with those brown eyes that seemed to see through all his masks. Is that why you came here? Because of the emptiness? I think so. He sighed. My mother thinks it's nonsense, that I should just accept my life and be done with it. But here with you, I feel real, like I'm finally myself. And who are you, really? Hazel's question was soft, but it penetrated deep into Asher's heart. He remained silent for a long moment, looking at his own hands. Hands that had never truly worked, never created anything with their own strength. I'm still figuring that out. 2 weeks passed since the conversation about college, and the dynamic between Asher and Hazel had subtly shifted. Not that there was coldness, quite the opposite. They seemed closer. But now there was a mutual awareness that they came from different worlds, and this created a delicious, confusing tension. Asher had moved from the inn to a small house he rented for the season. Nothing luxurious. 2 bedrooms, a simple living room, a basic kitchen. But it was his, at least for now, and that gave him a sense of independence he had never experienced. One Saturday morning, after helping Hazel and Grandma Maeve at the town's farmer's market, he made an impulsive decision. Hazel, would you like to see New York? She was putting sales money into a simple fabric wallet and stopped mid-motion. New York? Yeah. Asher felt his heart race. I need to sort some things out there, pick up more clothes, talk to my mother. I thought maybe you'd want to come with me. We can just stay for a weekend. Hazel exchanged a look with Grandma Maeve, who was folding the market stall's tablecloth. I don't know, Asher. I've never left here. Never? Never. She laughed, but there was a self-deprecating tone in her voice. Small-town girl who's never seen the world, right? That's not it. Asher quickly corrected her. It's just, I'd like to share that part of my life with you, so you can understand where I come from, and so you can feel less guilty for having so much. Grandma Maeve's observation was gentle, but spot on. Asher didn't deny it. Maybe there was some truth to that. Go on, honey. Grandma Maeve encouraged Hazel. You have a right to see the world, and Asher's right. It's important to understand where people come from. But what about you, Grandma? And the week's production? I'll manage. I managed before you were born, didn't I? Grandma Maeve winked. Besides, it's good for sweethearts to go out together once in a while. Grandma? Hazel's face turned red. We're not sweethearts. Oh, you're not? The old woman feigned surprise. Then why do you two keep looking at each other like lovesick fools? Asher felt his face flush, but he couldn't suppress a smile. Grandma Maeve was right, and everyone there knew it. So? He pressed. Are you coming? Hazel hesitated for a few more seconds, biting her lower lip, a habit Asher had learned to recognize as a sign she was weighing pros and cons. All right, she finally said. But just for the weekend, and I'll pay my share. Hazel? No arguing. She was firm. If I go on my terms. Asher nodded, knowing it was useless to argue. In truth, he admired her determination, even if it sometimes frustrated him. Deal. So next weekend? Okay. They ironed out the practical details. They would leave Friday morning and return Sunday evening. Asher offered to drive, and Hazel accepted, as long as they split the gas costs. On the way back to the house, Hazel was quieter than usual. Are you regretting it? Asher asked. No. She shook her head. Just nervous. It'll be strange meeting your mother. Why strange? Because mothers always know when another woman's interested in their son. Hazel blushed again as she realized what she'd said. Not that I mean, you are? Asher stopped walking and turned to her. And I'm interested in you too. They stood in the middle of the street looking at each other. The afternoon sun cast a golden light that made Hazel's eyes shine like honey. Asher felt like kissing her right there, but something held him back. Asher, I know. He understood her hesitation. We're very different. It's not just that. Hazel lowered her eyes. It's that I'm afraid of getting used to things I can't have. The sentence hit Asher like a punch to the gut. He wanted to say she could have anything, that he would give her everything, but he knew that would only prove her point, that they truly came from different worlds. And what if I get used to things I don't want to have anymore? He countered softly. Hazel looked at him, surprised. What do you mean? What if after meeting you, after discovering what it's like to truly live, I can't go back to that empty life I had before? They looked at each other in silence, both understanding they were on the verge of something that would change everything. The trip to New York wouldn't just be a vacation. It would be a test to see if what was growing between them was real enough to survive reality. The trip to New York was a revelation for both of them. Hazel spent most of the drive with her face pressed against the window, watching the landscape gradually shift from rural countryside to urban vastness. Asher, in turn, rediscovered his own city through her eyes. My goodness, it's all so big, Hazel murmured when they started to spot the first skyscrapers. How do people not get lost here? We do get lost, Asher chuckled. Just in other ways. He had booked a room for Hazel at a hotel near his apartment. Simple, but comfortable. He insisted on paying, and this time she didn't argue much, perhaps intimidated by the scale of the capital's prices. Where do you live? Hazel asked as they rode the hotel elevator up. Not far from here. I'll show you tomorrow. In truth, Asher was postponing the moment of taking her to the penthouse. He knew the contrast would be brutal, and he wasn't sure how she would react. They had dinner at an Italian restaurant in the neighborhood. Nothing too sophisticated, but even so, Hazel was impressed by the menu prices. $60 for pasta, she whispered incredulously. That's the New York price. Asher felt embarrassed. We can go somewhere else. No, it's fine, she smiled. It's just that with $60 I can buy enough ingredients to make peach preserves for the whole week. During dinner, Asher noticed how Hazel observed everything with curiosity. The restaurant's decor, the people at other tables, the ambient music. There was no judgment in her eyes, just genuine fascination with a world so different from hers. Everyone here seems in a hurry, she commented. That's because they are. Asher cut into his risotto without much appetite. In New York, stopping means wasting time. And time is money. But it must be exhausting to live like that. It is. He looked her in the eyes. That's why I went to Willow Creek. On Saturday morning, Asher finally took her to see his apartment. All the way up in the elevator to the 32nd floor, he felt as if he were bringing Hazel to a judgment. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse living room, Hazel froze. Asher. Her voice came out in a whisper. The living room was immense, decorated with designer furniture and expensive artwork. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. It was beautiful, impressive, and completely cold. "Is this where you live?" Hazel asked, stepping in slowly as if afraid of breaking something. "Used to," he corrected. "Now I don't know anymore." Hazel walked to the window, watching the city stretch to the horizon. Asher observed her, trying to read her expression. "It must be lonely," she finally said. "How so?" "So much beauty, so much luxury, but empty." She turned to him. "It looks like a museum, not a home." Asher looked around with her eyes and realized she was right. There were no personal photographs, no objects with sentimental value, nothing that told his story. It was all perfect and impersonal. "My mother decorated it," he explained. "She hired a famous designer. And you never wanted to change anything?" "I never thought about it." Asher realized it was true. "Until I saw your house." They spent the morning walking through the city. Asher showed Hazel places he frequented. The mall where he bought clothes, the club where he played tennis, the restaurants where he lunched with clients. In each place, he saw his own life through a different lens. "It's impressive," Hazel said as they watched the activity on Fifth Avenue. "But I can't imagine you here." "Why not?" "The Asher I know likes stirring peach preserves, chatting in the kitchen, sitting on the porch in the late afternoon." She gestured towards the buildings around them. "This seems like another world." "Because it is another world." Asher stopped walking. "And I don't know anymore which one is real." In the afternoon, the moment he most dreaded arrived, introducing Hazel to his mother. Eleanor had insisted on a dinner at the family mansion, and Asher couldn't come up with a plausible excuse. "You're nervous," Hazel observed in the car. "A little," Asher admitted. "My mother can be intense. She won't like me." "Why do you say that?" Hazel smiled sadly. "Because I'm exactly the type of person mothers like yours don't want for their sons." Asher wanted to contradict her, but deep down he knew she was right. Eleanor had already made her feelings clear about romantic adventures with unsuitable people. When they arrived at the mansion on the Upper East Side, Hazel was even more impressed than she had been by the penthouse. "Asher, is this a house or a hotel?" "It's the house where I grew up." He got out of the car and opened the door for her. "Remember, just be yourself. Don't let her intimidate you." But when Eleanor Almeida appeared at the front door, impeccable in a designer black dress with perfect hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, Asher realized the battle had only just begun. "So you're Hazel?" Eleanor extended her hand with a calculated smile. "Asher has spoken a lot about you." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Almeida." Hazel shook the offered hand, maintaining her upright posture despite the evident intimidation. Eleanor scrutinized her from head to toe, noting the simple dress Hazel had bought especially for the occasion, her modest shoes, the absence of expensive jewelry. Asher noticed his mother's evaluative gaze and felt his stomach clench. "Please, call me Eleanor," she said, leading them to the living room. "What an interesting dress, Hazel. Where did you buy it?" "At a small shop in Willow Creek," Hazel replied simply. "Ah, of course. The countryside has its own charm, doesn't it?" Eleanor's tone was cordial, but there was venom in the undertones. Dinner was served in the formal dining room with crystal and china worth more than the annual revenue from the preserves. Hazel behaved with dignity, using the correct silverware and maintaining polite conversation, but Asher saw the tension in her shoulders. "And tell me, Hazel," Eleanor delicately cut her salmon, "what do you do?" "I make artisan preserves with my grandma. Peach preserves mainly." "How interesting." Eleanor smiled. "Such a traditional profession. And do you plan to do that forever?" "For now, yes." Hazel kept her voice firm. "It's honest work and I like what I do." Of course, manual labor has its value." Eleanor took a sip of expensive wine. "But it probably doesn't earn much, I imagine." "Mother." Asher tried to intervene, but Eleanor cut him off with a look. "It's just curiosity, dear." She turned back to Hazel. "It must be hard to support a family on that alone." "We manage." Hazel lifted her chin. "It's not about how much you make, but how you live." "What a beautiful philosophy." Eleanor laughed, but the sound held no joy. "Although I imagine it's easier to have that philosophy when you're in your 20s. Life has a way of, how can I put it, bringing us back to reality. Asher felt his blood boil. Mother, I think... It's all right, Asher. Hazel gently placed her hand on his. Your mother is partly right. Life is hard, but it also teaches you that happiness can't be bought. True, Eleanor agreed with a sharp smile. But unhappiness due to lack of money is very real too. Wouldn't you agree? The silence that followed was tense. Asher looked at Hazel, who maintained her composure, but he saw the hurt in her eyes. Excuse me. Hazel stood up. Where is the restroom? Eleanor indicated the way, and Hazel left the room with dignity. As soon as they were alone, Asher exploded. What the hell was that, Mother? It was dinner. Eleanor dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin. And a necessary conversation. Necessary for what? To humiliate her? To open your eyes? Eleanor leaned back in her chair. Asher, you're playing house with some small-town girl. That's a whim, not love. You know nothing about what I feel. I know you're confusing an adventure with real feeling. Eleanor sighed. She's a nice girl, I won't deny it. But you two live in different worlds. What if I want to live in her world? You don't. The answer was categorical. You may think you do now in this rebellious phase of yours, but you don't. You were born for this, Asher. For responsibility, for leadership, for greatness, for loneliness too? Eleanor was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. Loneliness is the price of greatness, son. It always has been. Hazel returned to the room and dinner continued in strained silence. When they finally said goodbye, Eleanor kissed Asher's cheek and extended her hand to Hazel again. It was a pleasure meeting you, dear, she said. I hope you enjoy your stay in New York. In the car, the ride back to the hotel was silent. Asher tried several times to start a conversation, but Hazel just stared out the window. She wasn't wrong about everything, Hazel finally said when they pulled up to the hotel. Hazel, we're from different worlds, Asher. She turned to him. The question is, do you really want to give up your world? Or are you just having fun in mine? The drive back to Willow Creek was even quieter than the trip there. Hazel slept most of the way, or pretended to sleep. Asher wasn't sure. When they arrived in town, she simply said thank you, and got out of the car without looking back. Asher didn't show up on Rosewood Drive for 3 days. Not for lack of desire, but because he didn't know what to say. His mother's words echoed in his head, mixed with Hazel's final question. Was he just playing? Were his feelings real or just an escape from a life he no longer wanted? On Thursday, he finally gathered the courage to go to the house. He found Grandma Maeve alone in the kitchen, stirring a pot of peach preserves. Where's Hazel? He asked. She went to the post office. Grandma Maeve didn't take her eyes off the pot. A letter arrived for her this morning. A letter? From a New York company. Something about the peach preserve recipe. The old woman finally looked at him. Do you know anything about this? Asher frowned. No, I don't. What kind of company? I don't remember the name. But Hazel got strange after she read it. Left without saying anything. A cold feeling settled in Asher's stomach. He had a bad feeling about that letter. Hazel returned an hour later, pale and with red eyes. When she saw Asher in the kitchen, her expression hardened. What are you doing here? I came to talk to you. He stood up from the chair. About New York. About... You don't need to, she interrupted him. I already understand everything. Understand what? Hazel pulled an envelope from her pocket and threw it on the table. This. Your mother was very creative. Asher picked up the letter. It was from a company he had never heard of, offering to buy the peach preserve recipe for $50,000, provided Hazel signed an exclusivity contract that would prevent her from producing the preserves for 5 years. Hazel, I swear I know nothing about this. Of course you do. Tears of anger shone in her eyes. Did you think I was stupid enough not to notice? A mysterious company appearing out of nowhere, offering a fortune for a homemade recipe? I had no idea. Your mother was very clever. Hazel laughed bitterly. She didn't offer money for me to stay away from you. She offered a business opportunity. Much more subtle. Grandma Maeve picked up the letter and read it in silence, her face progressively hardening. $50,000 to stop making peach preserves, she murmured. And you, Asher, how much would your family pay for you to stop playing at poverty? The question hit Asher like a slap. Grandma Maeve, Go away, Hazel said softly. Please, just go away. Hazel, let me explain. Explain what? She turned to him, her eyes full of tears. That you're different? That you're not like your mother? But you are, Asher, you're just like them. We're not. Yes, you are. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. The difference is, she's at least honest about who she is. You keep pretending to be someone else. That you want a simple life. But at the first sign of trouble, the first time someone questions your feelings, you disappear for 3 days. Asher was speechless. Everything she was saying had a kernel of truth he didn't want to admit. I didn't run away. Yes, you did, and you know why? Because deep down you know your mother is right. Hazel swallowed a sob. We're from different worlds, and you would never be able to truly live in mine. That's not true. Then why didn't you defend me during dinner? Why did you stay silent when your mother was humiliating me? Asher opened his mouth but couldn't answer. Because she was right. He had remained silent, hoping the situation would resolve itself as he always did when things got difficult. That's it. Hazel nodded, reading his silence. You might even like me, Asher. You might even think you love me, but you don't love me enough to fight for us. Hazel, go away, she repeated more firmly. Go back to your old life, to your spreadsheets and your fancy dinners, to the world where you belong. Asher looked at Grandma Maeve seeking support, but the old woman had returned her attention to the peach preserves, as if he no longer existed. He left the house heartbroken, knowing he had lost something precious. And the worst part was that he knew it was entirely his fault. Asher returned to New York the next day, defeated. In the first few days, he tried to convince himself that he had made the right decision. He went back to social dinners, endless meetings, the empty commitments that filled his schedule, but nothing made sense anymore. 3 weeks later, he couldn't take it anymore. Every breakfast in the silent penthouse, every superficial conversation about business, every moment alone reminded him of what he had lost. The peach preserves he had brought from Willow Creek had been gone for days, but he kept the empty jar on his bedside table like an amulet of a life that could have been. You're different, Eleanor commented during a lunch at the club, more serious. I'm fine. Of course you are. She delicately cut her salad. That phase passed, didn't it? It was expected. Men your age sometimes need these episodes. Asher looked at her with a clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. You sent that letter, didn't you? Eleanor neither denied nor confirmed, merely shrugged. I did what any mother would do. I protected my son from an impulsive decision. You didn't protect me. Asher stood up from the table. You made me lose the only real thing I've ever had in my life. Asher, but he was already leaving, ignoring the curious glances of the other club patrons. 2 days later, he was driving back to Willow Creek. He had no plan, just the certainty that he needed to try to fix what he had broken. The sky was dark, heavy with rain clouds, but he drove as if racing against time. He arrived in town in the middle of the afternoon, under a heavy rain that had started a few hours earlier. The streets were flooded, and some residents moved anxiously, trying to protect their homes from the rising water. Asher went straight to Rosewood Drive, but when he got there, he found Grandma Maeve at the door, soaked and desperate. Grandma Maeve, what happened? Asher! Her eyes lit up when she saw him. Thank goodness. The shed is flooded. Hazel's in there trying to save the preserves. The shed was behind the house, and when Asher got there, he found Hazel knee-deep in water, carrying cans and jars to the higher shelves. The dark floodwater had invaded the place where they stored the week's production. Hazel! She turned at the sound of his voice, surprised and confused. Asher? What are you doing here? I came to help you. Without waiting for an answer, he took off his shoes and stepped into the cold water. Together they began to rescue what they could of the production. They worked in silence for over an hour, carrying jars, moving equipment, trying to minimize the losses. When the rain finally subsided, they had managed to save about half of the preserves. They were both drenched, caked in mud, exhausted. Asher had never worked so hard physically in his life, but he had never felt so useful. Why did you come back? Hazel asked, leaning against the shed wall. Because you were right. Asher sat on an empty crate. About everything. I didn't fight for us. I let my mother decide for me, as I always had. And now? Now I want to fight. He looked into her eyes, wet with rain and tears. If you'll let me. Hazel was silent, studying his face. You know that means giving up everything? Your family, your money, your life in New York? I know. And are you willing to do that? Asher thought about the empty penthouse, the soulless dinners, the gilded loneliness that awaited him in New York. Then he looked at Hazel, wet and tired, but real, more real than anything he had ever known. I've already chosen, he said, and I chose you. For the first time in weeks, Hazel smiled. It wasn't the radiant smile from before. There was still caution in her eyes, but it was a start. Let's see if you can handle making peach preserves every day then, she said. Can it be worse than board meetings? Much worse. She laughed. Peach preserves don't accept haste or lies. Then I'll have to learn to be patient and honest. You will. Hazel extended her hand to him. And you can start right now. We still have a lot of work ahead of us. A week after the storm, Asher was officially living in Willow Creek. He had sold the BMW, stored his suits in a suitcase at the back of the closet, and bought clothes suitable for kitchen work. His hands, once soft and manicured, now had small cuts and calluses from handling the kettles and fruit. You're stirring too fast. Hazel corrected his movement with the wooden spoon. The peach preserves aren't in a hurry. They teach patience. Like therapy, Asher smiled, slowing his pace. Exactly. Grandma Maeve approved from the other side of the kitchen. Back in the day, women used to make preserves when they needed to think about life. The repetitive motion calms the mind. Asher discovered it was true. After a few days of stirring peach preserves, his anxiety had considerably lessened. He no longer felt the constant need to check his phone or worry about things that were out of his control. My mother called yesterday, he said as he helped Hazel pack the jars. Said she sent her lawyers to verify if I was in full mental capacity. And are you? Hazel joked. For the first time in my life, I think so. Their relationship slowly rebuilt itself. Hazel had forgiven but not forgotten. She needed to see consistency in his actions, and Asher understood that. There were no more conversations about the future or grand promises. Just the present, one day at a time, building trust through small gestures. One afternoon, while organizing the stall for the Saturday farmers market, Hazel asked a question that caught him off guard. Don't you miss it? Your old life? Asher stopped labeling and thought honestly about the question. I miss some things, he admitted. The comfort, the financial security. But I don't miss the feeling of being empty inside. What if one day you want to go back? Why would I go back? I don't know. Hazel shrugged. Maybe when the novelty wears off. When you realize that simple life also has its problems. Asher put down the labeling supplies and turned to her. Hazel, are you testing my resolve? Maybe. She smiled, but there was seriousness in her eyes. I need to be sure you're not here out of rebellion or romanticizing poverty. And how can I prove it's not that? By staying. The answer was simple. When money gets tight, when you get sick and don't have private health insurance, when you realize you can't buy everything you want anymore, if you're still here, then I'll believe you. Her honesty touched him deeply. Hazel wasn't being cruel, just realistic. She had seen many people romanticize simple life until they discovered that simplicity also meant real limitations. All right, he said. I'll prove it. That night, Asher did something he hadn't done in years. He wrote a letter. Not a formal email, but a handwritten letter, on plain paper. Mother, I know you don't understand my choices and perhaps you never will, but I need you to know that I am happy here. For the first time in my life, I wake up every day knowing why I am waking up. I am not running from responsibility. I am finding a responsibility that makes sense to me. Hazel is not a phase or a rebellion. She is the person who taught me who I really am. And Grandma Maeve taught me that wealth isn't what you have, but what you are capable of giving. I don't expect your approval, but I hope one day for your respect. Asher. He mailed the letter the next day, knowing he probably wouldn't hear back. But it didn't matter. He was no longer living for others' approval. At the Saturday farmers market, something unexpected happened. A middle-aged man approached their stall and tasted the peach preserves. Wow, this reminds me of my childhood, he said, his eyes gleaming. My grandma used to make it just like this. It's a family recipe, Hazel explained, smiling. Do you sell outside of town? I own a diner in Macon, and I'd love to offer this to my customers. Asher and Hazel exchanged glances. It was the first real proposal for expansion they had received. We can talk, Hazel said cautiously. After the man left with their contact card, Asher asked, what if it works out? If the business grows? Then we'll see if you can handle success without losing your humility, Hazel smiled. That'll be the final test. Asher laughed, realizing that each stage of life would bring its own challenges, but for the first time he felt ready to face them. Not alone, but alongside someone who knew him for real and loved him not for what he had, but for what he was capable of becoming. 2 years after the storm, Asher felt completely integrated into the routine of the house on Rosewood Drive. He woke up before 6, helped Grandma Maeve light the stove, and spent his days learning the secrets of artisan production. His hands, now calloused from daily work, could recognize the exact consistency of the peach preserves just by the sound they made in the kettle. It was on a Saturday morning, while helping Grandma Maeve clean the basement to store the new equipment they had bought with the money from the business expansion, that Asher made a discovery that would change everything. Grandma Maeve, what is this? He asked, holding a cardboard box yellowed with age. The old woman looked at it and paled. Leave that there, Asher. It's old, unimportant stuff. But Asher's curiosity was already piqued. Inside the box were old documents, letters, and some photographs. One caught his attention. It was Grandma Maeve, much younger, wearing a maid's uniform, next to a mansion he recognized immediately. Grandma Maeve, isn't this my family's house? The old woman sighed deeply and sat on an old chair. Yes, it is. You worked there? I did. Her voice sounded tired. For over 20 years. I took care of your Grandma Beatrice until she passed away, and then I kept taking care of the house for your mother. Asher was speechless. Grandma Maeve had worked in his house and he never knew? He continued sifting through the papers and found a resignation letter dated 15 years ago. When he read the alleged reason, his blood ran cold. Suspicion of family jewel theft. Grandma Maeve, what happened? Hazel, who had come down to the basement after hearing voices, stood still on the stairs, observing the scene. Grandma? Her voice was worried. What are you talking about? Grandma Maeve looked at both of them and her eyes filled with tears. It's time to tell the truth. She began to speak with a choked voice. I worked at the Almeida family home. I was very fond of Mrs. Beatrice, Asher's grandma. She treated me like family, not just an employee. When she passed, I continued working for Eleanor. My mother, Asher whispered. One day, a diamond necklace went missing. It was very valuable. Eleanor accused me of stealing it. Grandma Maeve wiped her tears. I never stole anything in my life, but she said either I confessed or she'd call the police. And then? Hazel asked, sitting next to her grandma. I thought of my girl. Grandma Maeve looked at Hazel tenderly. You were only 7, you had just lost your parents. If I went to jail, what would become of you? So I signed the confession and left. Asher felt nauseous. And the necklace? What really happened to it? A few months later, a friend who still worked there told me. Grandma Maeve laughed bitterly. Eleanor found the necklace in the office safe. She herself had put it there and forgotten, but she never came to me to apologize. The silence in the basement was deafening. Asher looked at those documents as if they were evidence of a crime. And they were, in a way. Why did you never tell me this? Hazel asked. What for, honey? Grandma Maeve took her granddaughter's hand. So you'd grow up with anger in your heart? To carry the burden of an injustice that wasn't yours? I preferred for you to grow up free of it. Asher was devastated. Grandma Maeve, I didn't know any of this. Of course you didn't. You were a child. She looked at him kindly. And you're not to blame for your mother's mistakes. But I have a responsibility. Asher stood up, agitated. My family destroyed your reputation, unjustly took away your work, and I... You what? Grandma Maeve interrupted. You came here, worked with us, learned to make peach preserves, treated my granddaughter with respect. You don't owe me anything. But she does. Asher's voice was hard. My mother does. And she's going to hear from me. Hazel stood up too. Asher, there's no point in digging up the past. Yes, there is. He looked at the 2 women he loved most in the world. You deserve an apology. You deserve for the truth to be acknowledged." "And then?" Hazel asked. "What will that change?" Asher thought about the question. She was right. It wouldn't change the past, but it would change the present, and perhaps the future. "It will change that you won't carry the weight of this injustice alone anymore," he said. "And it will change that I won't pretend anymore that I can live in peace knowing my family did this to you." Grandma Maeve slowly stood up and placed a hand on Asher's shoulder. "Honey, you don't need to carry the sins of others." "I'm not carrying her sins." Asher looked firmly into the old woman's eyes. "I'm choosing to do what's right." Asher drove to New York on a Monday morning, carrying the box of documents he had found in the basement. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from nervousness but from a cold indignation that grew with every mile. He arrived at the company without warning. Eleanor's secretary tried to block his entry, claiming she was in a meeting, but Asher simply ignored her and walked into the office. Eleanor was alone, reviewing contracts. She looked up when the door opened and sighed. "Asher, what an unpleasant surprise." She didn't even take off her reading glasses. "Let me guess. You came to ask for money? Is the whole playing house in the sticks not working out?" "I came to talk about Grandma Maeve." Asher placed the box of documents on the desk, making some papers flutter. Eleanor's face subtly changed. "Who? Don't pretend you don't remember. Maeve Santos. She worked in our house for 20 years. You fired her, accusing her of theft." Eleanor slowly took off her glasses. "That's very old news, Asher." "Old, but unresolved." He opened the box and spread the documents on the table. "Because you knew she was innocent, didn't you?" "Asher, you don't understand how these things work." "I understand perfectly." His voice was controlled but cutting. "You lost a necklace, accused an innocent woman, destroyed her reputation, and when you found out you were wrong, you simply pretended nothing had happened." Eleanor stood up and walked to the window. "It was a complicated situation. If I retracted the accusation, I'd have to admit fault publicly. That would affect our reputation." "Our reputation?" Asher laughed in disbelief. "Mother, you destroyed someone's life to protect our reputation?" "I protected our family." Eleanor turned to him. "That's what mothers do, Asher. They protect their children. You didn't protect me. You shamed me." Asher picked up the resignation letter. This woman raised a granddaughter alone after that. She worked selling preserves on the street because she couldn't get a job in private homes anymore. And you know what else? She never spoke ill of us, never told anyone what you did. Then why are you here accusing me? Because I fell in love with her granddaughter. The revelation made Eleanor take a step back. "That's right. The woman you tried to drive away from me is the granddaughter of the person you unjustly ruined." Eleanor turned pale. You knew this when you brought her to dinner?" "No, I found out by chance, but you know what hurts me most?" Asher approached his mother. "It's that even after knowing the whole truth, they treated me better than my own family." "Asher, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he interrupted. "I understand that you are a person who prefers to destroy innocent lives than admit you were wrong." Eleanor sat heavily in her chair. For a moment she seemed older, more fragile. "What do you want from me?" she asked tiredly. "I want you to go to Willow Creek, Georgia. I want you to apologize to Grandma Maeve in person, and I want you to pay her the wages she lost all those years." "That's ridiculous." Eleanor hardened again. "I'm not going to humiliate myself for the sake of a maid." "Then don't go." Asher picked up the documents again. "But I'm going to tell everyone the truth. To the newspapers, to our partners, to everyone who wants to hear." "You wouldn't do that." "I would." Asher looked into his mother's eyes. "Because I learned that doing what's right is worth more than protecting appearances." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "And if I do what you're asking? What do I gain in return?" "The chance to look in the mirror without feeling disgusted." Asher's answer was simple and devastating. "And you? Will you come home?" "This isn't my home anymore, Mother." Asher walked towards the door. "My home is where the people who truly love me are. Not for what I have, but for who I am." "Asher," Eleanor's voice cracked. He stopped at the door but didn't turn around. "You have a week to decide," he said. "After that, I'll tell the story my way." When he left the office, Asher felt an enormous weight lift from his shoulders. For For the first time in his life, he had faced his mother as a man, not as a boy seeking approval. On the way back to Willow Creek, he called Hazel. "So?" she asked. "How did it go?" "Hard, but necessary." Asher smiled, even knowing she couldn't see him. "I'm coming home." "Home? To you too," he corrected. "I'm coming home to you." 6 days passed without news from Eleanor. Asher returned to the routine of the house on Rosewood Drive, but everyone noticed his tension. He stirred the peach preserves with more force than necessary and constantly checked the clock. "She's not coming," Grandma Maeve said on a Thursday afternoon. "And that's okay." "It's not okay." Asher stopped stirring the preserves. "She has to take responsibility for what she did. Honey, I've already made peace with what happened." The old woman approached him. "Holding on to anger only poisoned my heart for years. I don't want that anymore." "But Grandma Maeve?" "Asher." Hazel touched his arm gently. "Sometimes we have to accept that people are who they are. You can't force change." Asher was about to reply when they heard the sound of a car stopping in front of the house. Through the window, they saw a black Mercedes park. Eleanor got out of the back seat wearing a dark business suit, visibly uncomfortable. "She came," Hazel whispered. Grandma Maeve straightened her shoulders. "Then let's receive her properly." Eleanor clapped at the gate, as was customary in town. Asher went to answer, and they stood looking at each other for a moment without speaking. "May I come in?" she asked, and Asher noticed her voice was different. Less authoritative, more human. "Of course." Eleanor entered the simple house and looked around with curious eyes. There was no disdain in her expression, just a genuine surprise at the cozy atmosphere. "Eleanor." Grandma Maeve appeared in the living room and the two women faced each other. "It's been a while." "It has." Eleanor hesitated. Are you well?" "I am." The answer was simple, without coldness or resentment. They sat in the small living room, an awkward silence settling in. Eleanor nervously fiddled with her designer purse, clearly out of her element. Eleanor started and stopped. She took a deep breath and tried again. "I came because Asher made me realize that I owe you an explanation." "You don't owe me anything," Grandma Maeve said calmly. "Yes, I do." Eleanor looked at her own hands. "Maeve, I know you didn't steal the necklace. I always knew." The silence in the room grew thicker. Hazel instinctively took her grandma's hand. "I was going through a very difficult time," Eleanor continued. "I had just lost my husband. I was afraid of everything, paranoid. When the necklace went missing, I panicked. And when you offered to leave to avoid trouble, I let you. Because it was easier than admitting I was losing control." "Why now?" Grandma Maeve asked. "Why tell the truth now?" "Because my son taught me that some things are more important than pride." Eleanor looked at Asher with something that might have been admiration. "And because you didn't deserve to carry that injustice." Grandma Maeve was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "Eleanor, holding on to anger is bad for the heart. I forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, but for me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No one ever deserves forgiveness." Grandma Maeve smiled sadly. "We give forgiveness because we can no longer bear the weight of resentment." Eleanor began to cry, not the elegant tears of someone seeking pity, but deep sobs from someone releasing years of guilt. "I'm so sorry," she managed to say between tears. "I truly am sorry." Asher watched the scene in silence, seeing for the first time in years his mother being truly human. "I accept your apology," Grandma Maeve said, standing up. "Now, would you like some coffee? I just brewed some." The simplicity of the gesture definitively broke down the barriers. Eleanor nodded, still crying, and accepted the cup Grandma Maeve offered her. "It's good," she said, after taking a sip. "Coffee is always good when shared with good company," the old woman philosophized. They talked for over 2 hours. Eleanor spoke about the loneliness after her husband's death, about how she had become tough so as not to appear weak. Grandma Maeve spoke about the difficult years after being fired, but also about the joys of raising her granddaughter. When Eleanor stood up to leave, she left an envelope on the table. "What's this?" Grandma Maeve asked. "A small reparation for the years you lost." Eleanor was already at the door. "It won't bring back time, but perhaps it will help with the future." "Eleanor, Grandma Maeve tried to return the envelope. "Please." Eleanor held the old woman's hands. "Let me do at least this." After Eleanor left, Asher sat next to Grandma Maeve, who still held the unopened envelope. "Are you going to accept it?" "I am." She smiled. "Not because I need to, but because she needs to give. And sometimes you have to let people redeem themselves." "Thank you," Asher said. "For what?" "For teaching me that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's strength." 2 years later, Asher woke up before dawn, as had become his habit. But this time it wasn't to light the stove or stir peach preserves. It was his wedding day. The ceremony would be simple, in the backyard of the house on Rosewood Drive. No luxuries or ostentation, just the people who truly mattered. Hazel had insisted it be that way, and Asher couldn't have agreed more. He put on simple dress pants and a white cotton shirt. None of the Italian suits from his old life. His hands, now calloused from daily work, trembled slightly as he buttoned his shirt. "Nervous?" Grandma Maeve asked, appearing at the door of the room he had set up in the back of the house. "A little," Asher smiled, "but it's a good kind of nervous. That's how it is. Even the surest weddings make you anxious." She approached and straightened his collar. "You look handsome, honey." "Thank you, Grandma Maeve, for everything. You brought joy to this house," she winked, "and to my granddaughter's heart." Outside, the first guests were already arriving. There were about 40 people, neighbors, friends from the farmer's market, some loyal preserve customers. The backyard had been decorated with simple flowers and string lights, creating a magical and welcoming atmosphere. Asher positioned himself under the large oak tree where he had stirred his first batch of peach preserves, beside the local church pastor. His eyes scanned the small crowd until they found a familiar figure in the back. Eleanor was there, dressed simply, a light blue dress and flat shoes. In the past 2 years, she had visited Willow Creek a few times, always respectful, always trying to rebuild her relationship with her son. When Asher saw her, he waved discreetly, and she smiled back. The music began, not the traditional wedding march, but a country song Hazel loved, played by a local guitarist. And then she appeared. Hazel walked slowly through the backyard, wearing a simple white dress she had sewn herself. Her hair was loose, decorated only with a few flowers from the yard. There was no veil, no expensive shoes, but she was radiant. When she reached Asher's side, he whispered, "You're beautiful." "You too." She smiled, and it was the same smile that had captivated Asher that first day at the traffic light. The ceremony was brief and emotional. When it was time for the vows, Asher took Hazel's hands and spoke from his heart. "Hazel, you taught me that wealth isn't what you have, but what you give. You taught me that home isn't a place, but the people we choose to love. I promise to spend the rest of my life learning with you to be a better person." "Asher," she replied, tears in her eyes, "you showed me that courage isn't about not being afraid, but doing what's right even when you are afraid. I promise to walk beside you, in joy and sorrow, in abundance and scarcity, building a life as sweet as the peach preserves we make together." When the pastor declared them husband and wife, the kiss was soft and full of promises. Around them, the guests applauded, and Grandma Maeve cried with emotion. The reception was at the house itself, with food made by the neighbors and, of course, an entire table of artisan preserves. Asher watched the guests, simple people who had opened their hearts to welcome him, and felt richer than he had been in all his previous life. "Are you happy?" Hazel asked, coming to his side with 2 glasses of orange juice. "More than I ever imagined possible." He kissed her softly. "And you?" "Complete." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know, sometimes I still can't believe all of this is real." "It is." Asher held her close. "And it's ours." At the end of the night, after the last guests had left, Asher and Hazel sat on the porch with Grandma Maeve, having the last cup of coffee of the day. "You know what I learned making peach preserves?" Asher said suddenly. "What?" the 2 women asked. "That life is like making preserves. You can't rush it, you have to be patient. The ingredients might be simple, but when they're mixed with love and care, they create something special." He looked at the 2 women who had transformed his life, and that the secret is never in the recipe, it's in the hands that prepare it. "And in the people who share it," Hazel added, "and in the love that seasons everything." Grandma Maeve finished. Years later, when they told this story to their children, Asher and Hazel would always end by saying that happiness wasn't at the end of the journey, but in each day lived with purpose, each gesture of affection exchanged, each moment of shared simplicity, because they discovered that life, like peach preserves, gets sweeter when made slowly, with true ingredients, and shared with those you love. And so, in a small house on Rosewood Drive, three hearts learned that the best riches aren't counted in money but in smiles, hugs, and the sweet aroma that comes from the kitchen when someone cooks with love.